Good afternoon. Today, the people of Israel are under attack, orchestrated by a terrorist organization, Hamas. In this moment of tragedy, I want to say to them and to the world and to terrorists everywhere that the United States stands with Israel. We will not ever fail to have their back. We'll make sure that they have the help their citizens need and they can continue to defend themselves. You know, the world's seen appalling images. Thousands of rockets in a space of hours raining down on Israeli cities. I got up this morning and started this at 7:30, 8 o'clock, my calls. Hamas terrorists crossing in Israel, killing not only Israeli soldiers, but Israeli civilians. In the street, in their homes, innocent people murdered, wounded, entire families taken hostage by Hamas. Just days after Israel marked the holiest of days in the Jewish calendar. It's unconscionable. You know, when I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning, I told him the United States stands with the people of Israel in the face of these terrorist assaults. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people. Full stop. There's never justification for terrorist attacks. And my administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering. Let me say this as clearly as I can. This is not a moment for any party hostile to Israel to exploit these attacks to seek advantage. The world is watching. I've also been in contact with the King of Jordan, spoken with members of Congress, directed my national security team to engage with their Israeli counterparts, military to military, intelligence to intelligence, diplomat to diplomat, to make sure Israel has what it needs. I've also directed my team to remain in constant contact with leaders throughout the region, including Egypt, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Oman, the UAE, as well as our European partners and the Palestinian Authority. It's also a terrible tragedy on a human level. It's hurting innocent people. Seeing the lives that have been broken by this, the families torn apart, it's heartbreaking. And Jill and I are praying for those families who've been impacted by this violence. We grieve with those who've lost their loved ones, lost a piece of their soul. We have hope for swift recovery for many who have been wounded. But we're going to remain in close touch with Prime Minister. I personally am going to remain in close contact with Prime Minister Netanyahu as this situation continues to develop. And let there be no mistake, the United States stands with the state of Israel, just as we have from the moment the United States became the first nation to recognize Israel 11 minutes after its founding 75 years ago. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, was there an intelligence failure in the lead up to this attack?
Mr. President, can you tell us what Phoebe asked you specifically for support?
We now know that American citizens are among those being held by Hamas. I've directed my team to share intelligence and deploy additional experts from across the United States government to consult with and advise Israeli counterparts on hostage recovery efforts. Because as president, I have no higher priority than the safety of Americans being held hostage around the world. The United States has also enhanced our military force posture in the region to strengthen our deterrence. The Department of Defense has moved the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Eastern Mediterranean and bolstered our fighter aircraft presence. And we stand ready to move in additional assets as needed. Let me say again, to any country, any organization, anyone thinking of taking advantage of this situation, I have one word: don't. Don't. Today, Americans across the country are praying for all those families that have been ripped apart. A lot of us know how it feels. It leaves a black hole in your chest when you lose family. Feeling like you're being sucked in. The anger, the pain, the sense of hopelessness. This is what they mean by a human tragedy, an atrocity on an appalling scale. But we're going to continue to stand united, supporting the people of Israel who are suffering unspeakable losses and opposing the hatred and violence of terrorism. My team has been in near constant communication with our Israeli partners and partners all across the region and the world from the moment this crisis began. We're surging additional military assistance, including ammunition and interceptors, to replenish Iron Dome. We're going to make sure that Israel does not run out of these critical assets to defend its cities and its citizens. My administration has consulted closely with Congress throughout this crisis. And when Congress returns, we're going to ask them to take urgent action to fund the national security requirements of our critical partners. This is not about party or politics. This is about the security of our world, the security of the United States of America. Okay, thank you. Folks, before I begin, please have a seat. Before I begin, I want to say a few words why I'm a little late and what we're doing. And I want to speak a little bit about what's going on in Israel right now. We continue to monitor the situation in Israel very closely, and the Vice President and I and the Buckle My security team spoke with the Prime Minister Netanyahu again this morning, and I'll be speaking about this afternoon during my meeting with the Jewish American leaders. This attack has brought to the surface the painful memories and scars left by a millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide against the Jewish people. And this moment, we have to be crystal clear. There is no justification for terrorism, no excuse, and the type of terrorism that was exhibited here was just beyond the pale, beyond the pale. As I said yesterday, my commitment to Israel's security and the safety of the Jewish people is unshakable. The United States has Israel's back, and we're going to be working on this all through today and beyond. But again, I apologize for keeping.
Thank you. Please be seated. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to start by just saying the Vice President and I are outraged at these horrific terrorist attacks in Israel perpetrated by Hamas. We are outraged. With our broken hearts, we are sending our love, our strength, and our unwavering support to the people of Israel. I'm honored to be with all of you today as an American, as a patriot who loves this country, but also as a Jew. And like all Jews, I feel a deep, visceral connection to Israel and its people. We witnessed a mass murder of innocent civilians. It was a terrorist assault. There is never any justification for terrorism. There are no two sides to this issue. The images that we saw will be seared in our brains forever. Rockets falling on cities, people dragged from their homes and shot dead, children sheltering from bullets, bodies lining the streets. And all the while, we see videos of these terrorists cheering on these atrocities. The toll on Israel and the Jewish community is hard to imagine, but we can imagine it because it's happening. And I know many of you have sent texts and calls this weekend checking on loved ones. And I know too many of you received heartbreaking replies. And we know today that at least 22 Americans won't be coming home. I know you're all hurting. The entire Jewish community is hurting. I'm hurting. And we grieve with you. We stand with you. But thank God we have the steady leadership of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris during this unthinkable time in our history. Their moral compass, their calm, their empathy are what we need in this time of crisis. And we saw that yesterday when President Biden, with Vice President Harris and Secretary Blinken by his side, powerfully addressed the nation and made clear to the world that Israel has the United States' unwavering support. Our president and vice president are making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself. We are grateful for their leadership and support for Israel at this exceptionally difficult time. We also acknowledge and address how these events will impact us as Jews, and why we're here to have this discussion. And I know many of us feel a deep fear that these attacks will, unfortunately, and already have, led to a rise in hate and anti-Semitism. We're already seeing it. And that's why this discussion and the work you and your organizations do is so vitally important. Almost a year ago, I sat right in this spot, in this very room, and many of you were here with me that day. And then we called attention to the epidemic of hate that we're facing. And following that meeting, we took action. And in May, the Biden-Harris administration released the first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. The plan includes over 100 meaningful actions we are taking right now to fight back against anti-Semitism and hate. And each of you played a role in crafting this strategy. We couldn't have done this without you. So thank you for the work that you've done, that you're continuing to do. And as we're going to discuss later, myself and the Biden-Harris administration officials are working with federal, state, and local leaders to implement this plan across the country. We're going to continue to bring people together, and importantly, we're going to build coalitions to fight back against hate. We cannot do this alone. The story of the Jewish people has always been one of perseverance and resilience. In dark times, we come together and we fight back, and we also seek to build a better world. Last year, before my trip to Poland and Germany, President Biden took me into the Oval Office. He told me how his father had taught him about the horrors of the Holocaust, and how he later traveled to Dachau with his children and grandchildren to teach them those same lessons. So I know firsthand how important it is to President Biden to preserve our Jewish history and to make sure that hate has no safe harbor in America and the world. As an American Jew, I am so grateful that in this moment of tumult and pain, we have Joe Biden as president and Kamala Harris as vice president. It is now my honor to introduce a true advocate for the Jewish community. Please join me in welcoming President Joe Biden.
Folks, I came first of all to say thank you. Thank you to all of you in this room. You've not only cared, but you've been breaking your neck the last couple of years to deal with this overall issue of anti-Semitism. And I know many of you are personally impacted by what's happened in Israel. There are thousands of dual citizens, maybe some of your relatives that are there. And Doug, I want to thank you for all the work you've done on behalf of our administration to combat anti-Semitism. And I apologize, I've been on the phone around the clock with our friends around the world, quite frankly, discussing what's going on in Israel. And I want you to know that I want to thank you as well for, all of you as well, for working, the work you're doing to bring comfort and in this moment of grief for those who are grieving as well. And you'll read this weekend in synagogue, the Torah teaches us that God made stars to, quote, give light on the earth and separate light from darkness. Give light on the earth and separate light from darkness. You know, it's been hard to find that light during the darkness of these past few days. When terrorist groups like Hamas brought not only terror, but sheer evil to the world, evil that echoes the worst and matches, in some cases exceeds the worst atrocities of ISIS. More than 1,000 civilians slaughtered in Israel. And by the way, I've been speaking with a number of Israeli leaders, a number of leaders around the world, leaders in the region as well. And, among those who have been victimized, this evil, who've been killed, are at least 22 American citizens. This attack was a campaign of pure cruelty, not just hate, but pure cruelty against the Jewish people. And I would argue it's the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. The deadliest day since the Holocaust. One of the worst chapters in human history that reminded us all that expression I learned from my dad early on: silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. It really is. And I want you to know, I think you've already figured it out, I refuse to be silent, and I know you refuse to be silent as well. And you all, I know you're here with my senior staff, you all represent a voice that America has to hear. America can't be silent. We not only reject terrorism, but it goes beyond that. It goes beyond rejecting terrorism. I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu for I don't know how many times, but again this morning. And already we're surging additional military assistance to the Israeli Defense Force, including ammunition, interceptors to replenish the Iron Dome, and we've moved the U.S. carrier fleet to the Eastern Mediterranean, and we're sending more fighter jets there in that region, and made it clear to the Iranians, be careful. We want to make it real clear. We're working on every aspect of the hostage crisis in Israel, including deploying experts to advise and assist with recovery efforts. Now, the press is going to shout to me, and many of you are, that, what are you doing to get these folks home? If I told you, I wouldn't be able to get them home. Folks, there's a lot we're doing. A lot we're doing. I have not given up hope on bringing these folks home. But the idea that I'm going to stand here before you and tell you what I'm doing is bizarre. So I hope you understand how bizarre I think it would be to try to answer that question. In the days ahead, we're going to continue to work closely with our partners in Israel and around the world to ensure Israel has what it needs to defend its citizens, its cities, and to respond to these attacks. As I said yesterday, my commitment to Israel's security and the safety of the Jewish people is unshakable. The United States has Israel's back, and I have yours as well, both at home and abroad. You can see the pain in some of your faces. I walked into this room. You okay, kiddo? Well, your fear for family, friends back in Israel. You worry about kids being targeted in school, about going about their daily lives. You're hurt by the downplaying of Hamas's atrocities and blaming Israel. This is unconscionable. And I've asked members of my team, including Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas and Attorney General Garland, to work intensively with our Jewish community partners so many of you here to set up security around Jewish life in America, identify, prevent, and disrupt emerging threats that occur. We're also going to continue to condemn and combat anti-Semitism at every single turn, at every turn. The past few days have been a solemn reminder that hate never goes away. Hold on a second, I used to think you could defeat hate, that you could make it, all it does is go underground. It just goes underground, it doesn't go away. It only hides until it's given a little oxygen, a little bit of oxygen. And that's why I've secured the largest ever increase in funding for physical security for nonprofits, including synagogues, Jewish community centers, Jewish day schools. And in May, we released the first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism with the input from many of you in this room. Many of you in this room helped write that. It's the most ambitious, comprehensive effort to combat anti-Semitism in American history, in all of American history. And we're aggressively implementing it. But we must all do our part and forcefully speak out against anti-Semitism and push back against the attempts to deny or distort the facts. To make clear, there is no place for hate in America. Not against Jews, not against Muslims, not against anybody. And we mourn the act you and so many leaders have across the country, showing us what thousands of years of Jewish history has shown us. The enduring strength, and I mean this sincerely, the enduring strength and spirit of the Jewish community. If you excuse a point of personal privilege, you should say in the Senate. That's why I took my kids, everyone when they turned 14 years old, one at a time, put them on a plane and took them to Dachau. I wanted them to see that you could not know what was going on walking through those gates. You could not fail to understand as a country what was going on. And that's a fact. It had a profound impact on my children and my grandchildren. Some thought taking a 14-year-old grandchild was not a mistake, but I took them one at a time. I got 3 more to go. And folks, it's important. You know, the miracle of Israel is Israel. It's Israel itself. The hope it inspires. The light it represents to the world. And folks, I was asked in one of my very frank conversations with Bibi and with Herzog, so why do I feel so deeply about this? It's not about the region. I truly believe, were there no Israel, no Jew in the world would be ultimately safe. It's the only ultimate guarantee. The only ultimate guarantee. The only ultimate guarantee. And folks, because of you, and I mean this sincerely, because you're speaking up, because of the intensity and the intellect and the brilliance you bring to this cause, I think we have a chance to end this in a way that it makes it very difficult for it to be repeated. I want to thank you for your leadership. And as I said, there's a lot to talk about. And but I'm really, quite frankly, concerned as to, it's hard to talk about this without detail. And it's contrary to our interests to let out the detail of what we're going on. I mean, this is just round the clock, as you understand. You fully understand. But, you know, I've known Bibi for over 40 years. In a very frank relationship. I know him well. And the one thing that I did say, that it is really important that Israel, with all the anger, frustration, and just, I don't know how to explain it, that exists, is that they operate by the rules of war. The rules of war. And there are rules of war. And I believe Israel is doing everything in its power to pull the country together, stay on the same page, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure Israel succeed, and God willing, to bring home those Americans who are in harm's way. I'm going to let you all have the private conversation you've been having, which you should continue to have, but it just came to basically, I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. I give you my word as a Biden. Thank you. Thank you for the intensity of your support. It matters. It matters that Americans see what's happening. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever, anyway, but there are countries in the region that are trying to be of some help, including Arab nations that are trying to be of some help. So, anyway.
Mr. President, where do you draw strength and inspiration in these troubling times?
From my faith. From my faith. My faith that at the core of every human being is a spark of humanity and decency. It's got to be touched. It's got to be spoken to. That's what you do. That's why you're here. It's not about, revenge. It's about decency. Just basically decent, just basic decency. Treating people with a sense of, I don't know quite how to say it, but I know we can overcome this. I know we can overcome this. Look, I don't know anything about the kind of loss it's talking here, but I know a little bit of like to feel loss. Lose people you adore. Get a phone call saying they're gone. I get that part. Not the same, but I get the part. And what I've learned is that as we persevere, we can grow. And the day will come when the memory of that person or those persons bring a smile to your lips before it brings a tear to your eye. It will happen. It will happen, but God, it takes a long time sometimes. And when it's born out of something that has been anything from a mistake to a vicious intent, it varies in degrees. I'm not saying I know the same, but I just, look, I'll never forget, well, I won't go into that. Anyway, I just think that if we stay true to our values, pursue with every inch and every bit of our energy to get this right, we can bury this again and bring people back, and bring people home and bring it together. I think we can change the Middle East. But then again, I have been referred to as a congenital optimist. And I'm not going to answer any questions from you guys right now, but my team here knows when the press is gone, they'll talk more directly to you. But even then, they're not going to be able to tell you all that we're doing and all that's going on. So.
Question, sir. May we please say thank you. 80 years ago this week, a group of 400 rabbis came to Washington hoping to meet with Franklin Delano Roosevelt and appeal to him to act to rescue the Jews who were being persecuted in Europe. And they were refused a meeting with President Roosevelt. They were refused entry to the White House. And the fact that we are here today, and you have spoken as the President of the United States so clearly in support of Israel, so clearly in support of the Jewish people, and welcome leaders and representatives of the Jewish community into the White House for this discussion, shows what a dramatic distance we travel in these United States, how we as the Jewish community are blessed to live today in these United States, and we thank you for your leadership and your moral clarity.
Thank you. I also want to say a word about the situation in Israel. The more we learn about the attack, the more horrifying it becomes. More than 1,000 innocent lives lost, including at least 27 Americans. These guys make Al-Qaeda look pure. They're pure evil. As I said from the beginning, the United States, make no mistake about it, stands with Israel. The United States stands with Israel. Secretary of State Blinken was in Israel yesterday, and Secretary of Defense Austin is there today. We're making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself and respond to these attacks. It's also a priority for me to urgently address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. At my direction, our teams are working in the region, including communicating directly with the governments of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations, and the United Nations to surge support and humanitarian consequences for Hamas attack to help Israel. You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well. This morning, I spoke with the family members of all those Americans who are still unaccounted for on a Zoom call for about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. They're going through agony, not knowing what the status of their sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children are. You know, it's gut-wrenching. I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families. We're working round the clock to secure the release of Americans held by Hamas in close cooperation with Israel and our partners around the region. And we're not going to stop till we bring them home.
They can't, they have to go down.
Mr. President, Joe, I want to thank you for coming here today and for the unequivocal support you have given Israel during these trying times, a support that reflects the overwhelming will of the American people. I've seen your support every day in the depth and breadth of cooperation that we have had since the beginning of this war. A level of cooperation that is truly unprecedented in the history of the great alliance between our two nations. We see that support in your steadfast commitment to provide Israel with the tools we need to defend ourselves. We see that support in the clear message you've sent our enemies not to test our resolve, and in the 2 American carrier battle groups that you sent to the region to back up those words with action. But above all, Mr. President, the world sees that support in the moral clarity that you have demonstrated from the moment Israel was attacked. You've rightly drawn a clear line between the forces of civilization and the forces of barbarism. You describe what Hamas did as sheer evil. It is exactly that. Hamas murdered children in front of their parents, and parents in front of their children. They burnt people alive. They raped and murdered women. They beheaded soldiers. They searched for the secret hiding places where parents hid their children. And just imagine, Mr. President, the fear and the panic of those little children in their last moments as the monsters found out their hiding places. Hamas kidnapped women, children, elderly, Holocaust survivors. I know you share our outrage on this, and I know you share our determination to bring these people back. On October 7th, Hamas murdered 1,400 Israelis, maybe more. This is in a country of fewer than 10 million people. This would be equivalent to over 50,000 Americans murdered in a single day. That's 29 11s. That is why October 7th is another day that will live in infamy. Mr. President, you rightly said that Hamas is worse than ISIS. The German chancellor who visited here yesterday said that Hamas were the new Nazis. You're both right. And just as the civilized world united to defeat the Nazis and united to defeat ISIS, the civilized world must unite to defeat Hamas. I can assure you, Mr. President, Israel is united to defeat Hamas. And we will defeat Hamas and remove this terrible threat from our lives. The forces of civilization will prevail for our sake, for your sake, for peace and security in our region and in the world. Mr. President, for the people of Israel, there's only one thing better than having a true friend like you standing with Israel, and that is having you standing in Israel. Your visit here is the first visit of an American president in Israel at a time of war. It is deeply, deeply moving. It speaks to the depth of your personal commitment to Israel. It speaks to the depth of your personal commitment to the future of the Jewish people and the one and only Jewish state. So I know I speak for all the people of Israel when I say, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for standing with Israel today, tomorrow, and always.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much. Look, folks, I wanted to be here today for a simple reason. I want the people of Israel, the people of the world, to know where the United States stands. I've got my great Secretary of State here. He's been here for a lot, but I wanted to personally come and make that clear. Terrorist group Hamas has slaughtered, as has been pointed out, over 1,300 people. And it's not hyperbole to suggest slaughtered. And including 31 Americans. And they've taken scores of people hostage, including children. You said, imagine what those children hiding from Hamas were thinking. It's beyond my comprehension to be able to imagine what they're thinking. Beyond my comprehension. They're committed evils that, atrocities that make ISIS look somewhat more rational. You know, Americans are agreeing with you. They really are. And Americans are worried. Americans are worried because we know this is not an easy field to navigate, what you have to do. But the fact is that Israel, as they respond to these attacks, seems to me that have to continue to ensure that you have what you need to defend yourselves. And we're going to make sure that occurs, as you know. And we have to also bear in mind that Hamas does not represent all the Palestinian people, and has brought them only suffering. You know, years ago, I asked the Secretary of State when he and I were working in the Senate to write something to him, and said, he wrote a line that I think is appropriate. He said, it's not, we need not just, well, I won't go into it, I'll wait later, taking too much time, but the point is this, that I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there who are not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things. And also means encouraging life-saving capacity to help the Palestinians who are innocent, caught in the middle of this. And well, at any rate, that's who we are. Not just me, but that's who the United States is. And it's just not the example of our power, it's the power of our example that's almost as important. The world's looking. Israel has a value set like the United States does, and other democracies, and they're looking to see what we're going to do. So, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm very happy to be back in Israel with you. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to having a thorough discussion about where everybody goes from here. But thank you, and I want to say to the people of Israel, their courage, their commitment, their bravery is stunning. It's really stunning. I'm proud to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. We're walking press. Thanks, guys. Thank you, press. Thanks, guys.
Shannon?
Grandmother who hid for 20 hours from Hamas in her house.
My son was in the rescue team. She saved her. My parents, both of them was over 20 hours with 5 terrorists inside the house. After they made a massacre around the streets. We have a lot of friends, neighbors, police officers that was murdered by them to save my family. And I was able to stay alive and try to rescue them. And my mom, with the great bravery and street smart, was able to stay focused. She was stay focused, that she was able to help us and signal to us how many terrorists there inside the house, and that she was alive and she made noise, that we will figure it out. And the SWAT team, after over 20 hours, they broke into the house, killed 5 terrorists, and saved my parents with no harm at all. It's a heroic story of them. And another thing, I would like personally to tell you that thank you for your support in the way that you're a friend of Israel, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Mr. President, if I may, this is the young woman I was telling you about who saved people in her kibbutz. Her name is She's very embarrassed. שהיא ממש החיוך שלך מאיר את כל החדר. אני נלחמתי עבור הקיבוץ. I fought for my kibbutz. עבור המשפחה שלי. For my family. 600 תושבים. 600 inhabitants. ניצלו בזכותי. And they were saved because of her, thanks to her. So I'm very excited and I'm very honored to meet you. Thank you.
Yes,
Mr. President, if I may.
I'm Ellie Beer. I'm an American, Jew and Israeli. And we have 7,000 first responders, United Hatzalah. We're spread around Israel. Our response is usually 90 seconds, and we were there in the first moments seeing the atrocities that happened. We saw women that were raped and then murdered, children, little babies that were torn around, taken away from their parents, murdered in front of their parents, heads chopped off. Our volunteers were brave. We have 2 volunteers who were murdered. One of them is an Arab, one Arab volunteer of United Hatzalah, and one Jewish volunteer of United Hatzalah. One was captured in 9 hours. He was tied to a pole while they were shooting other people. And we have 2 volunteers who are in Gaza now, captured by the terrorists, and 8 volunteers injured. We were very proud to serve the people in Israel. A lot of us are Americans, and we, United Hatzalah, we're in the front lines of every emergency. We're so proud that you, the President of the United States, came here to Israel to support this country. You uplifted the whole spirit in this country and all the Jewish people in the world. So I want to thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do. Thank you.
Love you.
Dana Koka moved here from New York 8 years ago from a physician in pediatric emergency medicine. The very day I received calls from the hospital to prepare for a mass casualty event, the likes of which I never could have prepared for in my life. And I treated wounded people, soldiers, civilians, but mostly the children, as I am a pediatrician. So babies burned in their mother's arms, some with stories that I don't think they'll ever recover from. I treat Palestinian children, I treat Jewish children, I treat Arab Israeli children, and when my resident calls me at home at night that somebody is not doing well, I don't ask where they're from. We currently, in the hospital I work in, have over 50 Palestinian families, and we treat them the same as ours. Just asking for some medical assistance, attention to our children who are over there.
There's something I can tell you. I got a phone call saying my wife and daughter were dead. My 2 boys were dead. I got a phone call, my son on the wreck, killed. I understand a little bit about this. Guess what? The physician makes a gigantic difference. You know who else does? Nurses. Nurses. Thank you for what you do. You help fill that black hole.
Farid, and first of all, I would love to thank you for this unprecedented support in Israel. I deeply appreciate it. On peace times, I'm a CEO of a startup company called the OEI and a former Fulbrighter at MIT and Harvard. I also have an NGO that empowers the youth at risk, both Arab and Jews, but since October 7th, we're 100% soldiers, me and my brothers and sisters from all the country. And we just grabbed a small bag, took our stuff, and just volunteered with all the brave men. And please, two things that I've loved to ask from you. First of all, please keep supporting us in eliminating Hamas once and for all, not for the sake of us, even not for the Israelis in the south, but for the sake of children and grandchildren. And the second thing, we are fighting in the frontier against evil and against antisemitism. Please keep doing the same in the US. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My name is David Zelmovich. I'm the head of the families of the Hostages Network. Actually, I'm a voice for a few hundreds of families. The reality is very important. I'm the second generation of the Holocaust. What I'm seeing now in these stories, it's even worse than that. So please do whatever you can for the families that are taking the first people who are sick, ill. Please help us to push the Red Cross to give them medicine. We have all the medicine gathered together to send them. If they lose the life, they won't get the medicine, the diabetic, the Crohn, the people who are in June, they need all that. This is the first priority. And later on, whatever you can help, there's hundreds, the infants, babies, teenagers, elder, injured people, sick people. It's kind of, it's more humanitarian than anything. So please do your best. Thank you much.
You're obviously doing your best.
Paramedic that was at the party, and he refused to evacuate scene. He continued to treat his Jewish colleagues and the Jewish goers with the party. Now it brought us a lot of pain and sorrow, but also pride, because he didn't lose his humanity. He didn't distinguish between Jewish or Arab, Muslim or Christian. Anyone that he needed to treat, he treated. That's the legacy of our family. And in my day job, I work to bring Jewish and Arab teachers to work together, and Arab and Jewish youth to meet with each other, usually for their first meeting. But we're proud of his legacy. And
my father, when he looked at you, said, "Son, you got good blood."
Thank you. If needed, we'll do it again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, thank you so much for coming here and encouraging us. I'm here wearing three hats. The first is that I lost two of my brothers-in-law. One of them is the citizen of the U.S. as well, a great warrior, a colonel that died in the first day of the war. The other one is the son of a woman, my mother-in-law, who has lost her husband 50 years ago on the same date in the Yom Kippur War. Both of them were heroes who were fighting on Israeli land in the cities and villages to save civilians. The other thing is that I'm a part of legal scholars and activists who are here to make sure that the atrocities that were executed against civilians, children, and men, and the elderly, and particularly women, will be acknowledged by institutions worldwide, and thank you for your support in this. And the last one is that I'm president of an academic college in the South, and that the academia in Israel is now having 200,000 of our students fighting for our safety, to be able to get back to higher education as a hope for Jews and Arabs alike, where I have 35% of my students Bedouin from the Negev. And this is our hope, through higher education, to bring us back together with the hope that we need at this moment.
I'm married to a college professor, too.
I know, and it's an education college as well that we have. She's in my
God.
Mr. President, we're going to go right this way.
First thing you do?
Yes, we're just going to.
in the minutes and in the hours and days that followed the October 7th terrorist attacks, there were images and stories that emerged of horror, and as you said, Mr. President, that were unimaginable. But what also emerged were stories of heroism and of survival and of incredible hope and people coming together in community and national service. And Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, the folks that we have gathered with us here today are representative of all of that and representative of the unity and the resilience of the Israeli people and the light that is shining through this incredible darkness. Mr. Secretary.
I've had the opportunity to meet so many Israelis over the last few days that I've been in and out of Israel. I've heard the stories. I've heard about the lives lost and changed forever. We know that virtually every Israeli has been touched by the bloody hand of Hamas. But what I found is a nation that's united, yes, in grief, but also united in resolve. And we know the pride that Israel takes in the ability to defend itself by itself, but as we want to make very clear, you don't have to do that because we're here. We're here too, to make sure that you're able to defend yourselves and to deal with something that is, I think, on a basic human level, almost unimaginable. So hard for any of us to process or to understand, but it's been so important to meet and talk to so many of you because that's what makes it real. And no one understands that better, no one feels that more than the President of the United States, Mr. President.
Folks, there's an Irish poet named William Butler Yeats, and he wrote a line. He said, "Too long a suffering makes a stone of the heart." Too long a suffering makes a stone of the heart. The thing that I found in just this real quick meeting with all of you is none of your hearts have turned to stone yet. Every one of you talked about what you have to do. Every one who talked to you about having to reach out. Talked about whether or not they're a Jew or a Muslim. Reach out. And, I've often said, I remember the first time that I was in Israel with Golda Meir. She was just before the 6-Day War. And she was telling me how terrible everything was, which it was. She kept flipping the maps up and down behind her, and all of a sudden she looked at me and she said, "Would you like a photograph?" And I thought, that's unusual. And she just got up and walked out the door outside her office. And we're standing there having a photograph taken like you and I are standing looking at the press. And she, without looking at me, she turned, she like this, she said, "You look worried, Senator." I said, "I am." She said, "Don't worry, we Jews have a secret weapon in our fight. We have no place else to go." Well, the truth of the matter is, if there weren't an Israel, we'd have to invent one. The truth of the matter is that I believe that, as I went home and said, I got in trouble at the time, but it's true. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. And I think the security and safety of Jews worldwide is anchored in the continued vibrance of the state of Israel. That's what I think it's about at its core. And so I've admired you all, this country for so long. And I'm convinced that the more people know your responses to what's happening, as opposed to just what war and peace is about, the more they're going to be kind of embrace Israel. And but a lot more to say, but I'd like to talk to you in private if I can.
Thank you.
That I was shown by my defense lawyer.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Please have a seat. I come to Israel with a single message. You're not alone. You are not alone. As long as the United States stands, and we will stand forever, we'll not let you ever be alone. Most importantly, I know the recent terrorist assault on the people of this nation has left a deep, deep wound. More than 1,300 innocent Israelis killed, including at least 31 American citizens by the terrorist group Hamas. Hundreds of young people at a music festival. The festival was for peace, gunned down as they ran for their lives. Scores of innocents, from infants to elderly grandparents, Israelis and Americans, taken hostage. Children slaughtered, babies slaughtered, entire families massacred. Rape, beheadings, bodies burned alive. Hamas committed atrocities that recall the worst ravages of ISIS, unleashing pure, unadulterated evil upon the world. There's no rationalizing it, no excusing it, period. The brutality we saw would have cut deep anywhere in the world, but it cuts deeper here in Israel. October 7th, which was a sacred Jewish holiday, became the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. It has brought to the surface painful memories and scars left by millennia of antisemitism and the genocide of the Jewish people. The world watched then, it knew, and the world did nothing. We will not stand by and do nothing again. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. To those who are living in limbo, waiting desperately to learn the fate of a loved one, especially to families of the hostages, you're not alone. We're working with partners throughout the region, pursuing every avenue to bring home those who are being held captive by Hamas. I can't speak publicly about all the details, but let me assure you, for me, as the American president, there's no higher priority than the release and safe return of all these hostages. To those who are grieving, a child, a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a friend, I know you feel like there's that black hole in the middle of your chest. You feel like you're being sucked into it. The survivor's remorse, the anger, the questions of faith in your soul, staring at that empty chair, sitting Shiva, the first Sabbath without them. They're the everyday things, the small things that you miss the most. The scent when you open the closet door. The morning coffee you shared together. The bend of his smile, the perfect pitch of her laugh. The giggle of your little boy, the baby. For those who have lost loved ones, this is what I know. They'll never be truly gone. There's something that's never fully lost. Your love for them and their love for you. And I promise you, you'll be walking along some days and say, what would she or he want me to do? You smile when you pass a place that reminds you of them. That's when you know. When a smile comes to your lips before a tear to your eye, that's when you know you're going to fully make it. That's what will give you the fortitude to find light in the darkest hours. When terrorists believed they could bring you down, bend your will, break your resolve. But they never did, and they never will. Instead, we saw incredible stories of heroism and courage, of Israelis taking care of one another, neighbors forming watch groups to protect their kibbutz, opening their homes to shelter survivors. Retired soldiers running into danger once again. Civilian medics flying across rescue missions. And off-duty medics at the music festival caring for the wounded before becoming a victim himself. Volunteers retrieving bodies of the dead so families could bury their loved ones in accordance with Jewish tradition. Reservists leaving behind their families, their honeymoons, their studies abroad without hesitation, and so much more. The State of Israel was born to be a safe place for the Jewish people of the world. That's why I was born. I've long said, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent it. And while it may not feel that way today, Israel must again be a safe place for the Jewish people. And I promise you, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that it will be. 75 years ago, just 11 minutes after its founding, President Harry S. Truman and the United States of America became the first nation to recognize Israel. We've stood by your side ever since. We're going to stand by your side now. My administration was in close touch with your leadership from the first moments of this attack. We're going to make sure we have what you need to protect your people, to defend your nation. For decades, we've ensured Israel's qualitative military edge. And later this week, I'm going to ask the United States Congress for an unprecedented support package for Israel's defense. We're going to keep Iron Dome fully supplied so it can continue standing sentinel over Israeli skies, saving Israeli lives. We've moved U.S. military assets to the region, including positioning the USS Ford Carrier Strike Group in the Eastern Mediterranean, with the USS Eisenhower on the way, to defer further aggression against Israel, and to prevent this conflict from spreading. The world will know that Israel is stronger than ever. And my message to any state or any other hostile actor thinking about attacking Israel remains the same as it was a week ago. Don't. Since this terrorist attack took place, we've seen it described as Israel's 9/11. Though for a nation the size of Israel, it was like 15 9/11s. The scale may be different, but I'm sure those horrors have tapped into some kind of primal feeling in Israel, just like it did and felt in the United States. Shock, pain, rage, an all-consuming rage. I understand, and many Americans understand. You can't look at what has happened here to your mothers, your fathers, your grandparents, sons, daughters, children, even babies, and not scream out for justice. Justice must be done. But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes. I'm the first U.S. president to visit Israel in time of war. I've made wartime decisions. I know the choices are never clear or easy for the leadership. There's always cost, but it requires being deliberate. It requires asking very hard questions. It requires clarity about the objectives and an honest assessment about whether the path you're on will achieve those objectives. The vast majority of Palestinians are not Hamas. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses innocent families in Gaza as human shields, putting their command centers, their weapons, their communications tunnels in residential areas. Palestinian people are suffering greatly as well. We mourn the loss of innocent Palestinian lives like the entire world. I was outraged and saddened by the enormous loss of life yesterday in the hospital in Gaza. Based on the information we've seen to date, it appears the result of an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza. The United States unequivocally stands for the protection of civilian life during conflict, and I truly grieve for the families who were killed or wounded by this tragedy. The people of Gaza need food, water, medicine, shelter. Today, I asked the Israeli cabinet, who I met with for some time this morning, to agree to the delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza, based on the understanding that there will be inspections and that the aid should go to civilians, not to Hamas. Israel agreed the humanitarian assistance can begin to move from Egypt to Gaza. Let me be clear, if Hamas diverts or steals the assistance, they will have demonstrated once again that they have no concern for the welfare of the Palestinian people. And it will end. As a practical matter, it will stop the international community from being able to provide this aid. We're working in close cooperation with the government of Egypt, the United Nations, and its agencies like the World Food Program and other partners in the region to get trucks moving across the border as soon as possible. Separately, I ask Israel that the global community demand that the International Red Cross be able to visit hostages. I just demanded that the United States fully supports. Today, I'm also announcing $100 million in new U.S. funding for humanitarian assistance in both Gaza and the West Bank. This money will support more than 1 million displaced and conflict-affected Palestinians, including emergency needs in Gaza. You are a Jewish state. You are a Jewish state, but you're also a democracy. And like the United States, you don't live by the rules of terrorists. You live by the rule of law. And when conflicts flare, you live by the law of wars. What sets us apart from the terrorists is we believe in the fundamental dignity of every human life. Israeli, Palestinian, Arab, Jew, Muslim, Christian, everyone. You can't give up what makes you who you are. If you give that up, then the terrorists win, and we can never let them win. You know, Israel's a miracle, a triumph of faith and resolve and resilience over impossible pain and loss. Think about October 7th, the Jewish holiday, where you read about the death of Moses, a tragic story of a profound loss to an entire nation, a death that could have left hopelessness in the hearts of the entire nation. But though Moses died, his memory, his message, his lessons have lived on for generations of the Jewish people as well as many others. Just as the memory of your loved ones will live on as well. After reading the story of Moses' death, those who observe the holiday began reading the Torah from the very beginning. The story of creation reminds us of two things. First, that when we get knocked down, we get back up again, and we begin anew. And second, when we're faced with tragedy and loss, we must go back to the beginning and remember who we are. We are all human beings, created in the image of God with dignity, humanity, and purpose. In the darkness, to be the light unto the world is what we're about. You inspire hope and light for so many around the world. That's what the terrorists seek to destroy. That's what they seek to destroy. Because they live in darkness, but not you, not Israel. Nations of conscience like the United States and Israel are not measured solely by the example or power. We're measured by the power of our example. That's why, as hard as it is, we must keep pursuing peace. We must keep pursuing a path so that Israel and the Palestinian people can both live safely, in security, in dignity, and in peace. For me, that means a two-state solution. We must keep working for Israel's greater integration with its neighbors. These attacks have only strengthened my commitment and determination and my will to get that done. I'm here to tell you that terrorists will not win. Freedom will win. So let me end where I began. Israel, you're not alone. The United States stands with you. I told the story before, and I'll tell it again, of my first meeting with an Israeli prime minister 50 years ago as a young senator. I was sitting across from Golda Meir at her desk in her office. And she had a guy who later became prime minister, sitting next to me, just before the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And she flipped the maps up and down, telling me how bad things were and how terrible they were. All of a sudden she looked at me and she said, would you like a photograph? I looked at her. She got up from her desk and walked out into that hallway. I think it's marble flooring. Walked out in the hallway. We walked out and there were a bunch of photographers standing in front of us. We were standing shoulder to shoulder. Without her looking at me, she said to me, knowing I'd hear her, "Why do you look so worried, Senator Biden?" And I said, "Worried? Like, of course I'm worried." And she looked at me and she didn't look. She said, "We don't worry, Senator. We Israelis have a secret weapon. We have nowhere else to go." Well, today, I say to all of Israel, the United States isn't going anywhere either. We're going to stand with you. We'll walk beside you in those dark days. And we'll walk beside you in the good days to come. And they will come. As you say in Hebrew, which I'm not going to attempt to do because I'm such a terrible linguist, I'll say it in English. The people of Israel live. The people of Israel live. Israel will be safe, secure, Jewish, and democratic state today, tomorrow, and forever. May God protect all those who work for peace. God save those who are still in harm's way. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, what is your red line that would prompt U.S. military involvement in this war?
Mr. President, your team said you have tough questions.
He wrote a line. He said, "Too long a suffering makes a stone of the heart." Too long a suffering makes a stone of the heart. The thing that I found in just this real quick meeting with all of you is none of your hearts have turned to stone yet. Every one of you talked about what you have to do. Everyone talked to you about having to reach out. Talked about whether or not they're a Jew or a Muslim. Reach out. And, I've often said, I remember the first time that I was in Israel with Golda Meir. She was just before the Six-Day War. And she was telling me how terrible everything was, which it was. She kept flipping the maps up and down behind her, and all of a sudden she looked at me and she said, "Would you like a photograph?" And I thought, that's unusual. And she just got up and walked out the door outside her office. And we're standing there having a photograph taken like you and I are standing looking at the press. And she, without looking at me, she turned, she like this, she said, "You look worried, Senator." I said, "I am." She said, "Don't worry, we Jews have a secret weapon in our fight. We have no place else to go." Well, the truth of the matter is, if there weren't an Israel, we'd have to invent one. The truth of the matter is that I believe that, as I went home and said, I got in trouble at the time, but it's true. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. And I think the security and safety of Jews worldwide is anchored in the continued vibrance of the state of Israel. That's what I think it's about at its core. And so I've admired you all, this country for so long. And I'm convinced that the more people know your responses to what's happening, as opposed to just what war and peace is about, the more they're going to be kind of embrace Israel. And but there's a lot more to say, but I'd like to talk to you in private if I can. That I was shown by my defense lawyer.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Just one thing, sir. You said you were very blunt with the Israelis on the need to get humanitarian aid to Gaza, or what exactly?
On everything. So, No, I was very blunt about the need to support getting humanitarian aid to Gaza. Get it to Gaza and do it quickly.
All right.
And that,
Any more about the hospital, sir? May I?
don't.
May I ask you about? There's a report in the Times of Israel that says Biden officials have indicated to Israel in recent days that if Hezbollah initiates a war against Israel, the U.S. military will join the IDF in fighting the terrorist group.
Not true.
Not true.
That was never said.
Do you think there's a lesser chance now that Israel won't go in and into Gaza, and that can be averted?
We had a long talk about that and what alternatives there are. Our military is talking with our military about what the alternatives are, but I'm not going to go into that either.
Did you find Bibi receptive to the humanitarian argument you made? And
yes.
Was there any pushback from him, or you felt that you were able to get across that?
But we've had a number of discussions on this. It's not new. Look, I don't know what you picked up in Israel, but I got no pushback. Virtually none. Let me say it again. I got no pushback.
From the Israelis or from all the partners here?
All the partners. Virtually none. And this is, look, it's, anyway, but I'm hopeful we can get some Americans out as well of Gaza, and hopefully we can continue to work toward getting other Americans out through other means as well.
Can you talk about the impact of meeting the survivors and the first responders?
And that's all personal. Look, I spent an hour and a half about with 17 or 18 before. And I don't know how to say this. Virtually every mass shooting, every circumstance where a large number of people have been victimized and lost, I spoke with them. I learned a long time ago, which you've all learned in your lives as well. When someone's going through something that is beyond their comprehension, that they ever thought they'd have to go through, if they see someone who they think understands or maybe been through something not the same but similar, it gives them some sense of hope. And I always get criticized sometimes by my staff because when I go to these events, I stay for 3 and 4 hours and answer all their questions. But it matters. It matters a lot. And look, I'm talking, some of you have gone through a hell of a lot more than I've gone through, and a lot more than other people have gone through. And you understand. So it's just people are looking for just something to grab, something that gives them some sense of hope. And that's, if I can do a little bit of that, then it's, it's worth doing. It was done for me, so.
So do you think it was necessary for you to come here to get this deal done? Was the in-person diplomacy aspect really important here?
What do you think? I'll you answer that.
You joked about the House. Do you have any view of Jim Jordan and his predicament?
Do I have any what?
Do you have a view of Jim Jordan's current predicament, unable to secure the speakership?
I ache for him. No. Zero. None.
Mr. President?
How about the hospital, sir? People all over the region are upset about the hospital and don't necessarily believe you or the Israelis that they didn't have anything to do with it. Do you have a message to the people in the streets right now?
Well, I can understand why in this circumstance they wouldn't believe. I can understand that. But I would not, you notice I don't say things like that unless I have faith in the source from which I've gotten it. Our Defense Department says it's highly unlikely that it was Israelis, but if a different footprint, and they've intercepted some anyway. So that's why, if you notice, I didn't say it at first. I wanted to make sure that I knew. And look, And I'm not suggesting that Hamas deliberately did it either. It's that old thing, gotta learn how to shoot straight. And it's not the first time Hamas has launched something that didn't function very well. So I don't know all the detail, but I do know the people at the Defense Department who I respect, the intelligence community that I respect. It's highly improbable that Israel did that.
Mr. President, are the Israelis operating within the rules of war that you talked about last week being so important?
Good talking, Joe. Instead, we saw incredible stories of heroism and courage, of Israelis taking care of one another, neighbors forming watch groups to protect their kibbutz, opening their homes to shelter survivors, retired soldiers running into danger once again, civilian medics flying across rescue missions, and off-duty medics at the music festival caring for the wounded before becoming a victim himself. Volunteers retrieving bodies of the dead so families could bury their loved ones in accordance with Jewish tradition. Reservists leaving behind their families, their honeymoons, their studies abroad without hesitation, and so much more. The State of Israel was born to be a safe place for the Jewish people of the world. That's why it was born. I've long said, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent it. And while it may not feel that way today, Israel must again be a safe place for the Jewish people. And I promise you, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that it will be. 75 years ago, just 11 minutes after its founding, President Harry S. Truman and the United States of America became the first nation to recognize Israel. We've stood by your side ever since. We're going to stand by your side now. My administration was in close touch with your leadership from the first moments of this attack. We're going to make sure we have what you need to protect your people, to defend your nation. For decades, we've ensured Israel's qualitative military edge. And later this week, I'm going to ask the United States Congress for an unprecedented support package for Israel's defense. We're going to keep Iron Dome fully supplied so it can continue standing sentinel over Israeli skies, saving Israeli lives. We've moved U.S. military assets to the region, including positioning the USS Ford Carrier Strike Group in the Eastern Mediterranean, with the USS Eisenhower on the way to defer further aggression against Israel and to prevent this conflict from spreading. The world will know that Israel is stronger than ever. And my message to any state or any other hostile actor thinking about attacking Israel remains the same as it was a week ago. Don't.
Can you talk about the impact of meeting the survivors and the first responders?
And that's all personal. Look, I spent an hour and a half about 17 or 18 before, and I don't know how to say this. Virtually every mass shooting, every circumstance where a large number of people have been victimized and lost, I spoke with them. I learned a long time ago, which you've all learned in your lives as well. When someone's going through something that is beyond their comprehension that they ever thought they'd have to go through, if they see someone who they think understands or maybe been through something not the same but similar, it gives them some sense of hope. And I always get criticized sometimes by my staff because when I go to these events, I stay for 3 and 4 hours and answer all their questions. But it matters. It matters a lot. And look, I'm talking, some of you have gone through a hell of a lot more than I've gone through, and a lot more than other people have gone through. And you understand. So it's just people are looking for just something to grab,
something that gives them some sense of hope. And that's, if I can do a little bit of that, then it's, it's worth doing. It was done for me, so.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We're facing an inflection point in history. One of those moments where the decisions we make today are going to determine the future for decades to come. That's what I'd like to talk with you about tonight. Early this morning I returned from Israel. They tell me I'm the first American president to travel there during the war. I met with the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet. And most movingly, I met with Israelis who had personally lived through horrific horror of the attack by Hamas on the 7th of October. More than 1,300 people slaughtered in Israel, including at least 32 American citizens. Scores of innocents, from infants to the elderly grandparents. Israelis, Americans taken hostage. As I told the families of Americans being held captive by Hamas, we're pursuing every avenue to bring their loved ones home. As president, there is no higher priority for me than the safety of Americans held hostage. The terrorist group Hamas unleashed pure, unadulterated evil in the world. But sadly, the Jewish people know perhaps better than anyone that there is no limit to the depravity of people when they want to inflict pain on others. In Israel, I saw people who are strong, determined, resilient, and also angry, in shock and in deep, deep pain. I also spoke with President Abbas, the Palestinian Authority, and reiterated that the United States remains committed to the Palestinian people's right to dignity and to self-determination. The actions of Hamas terrorists don't take that right away. Like so many other, I'm heartbroken by the tragic loss of Palestinian life, including the explosion at the hospital in Gaza, which was not done by the Israelis. We mourn every innocent life lost. We can't ignore the humanity of innocent Palestinians who only want to live in peace and have an opportunity. The assault on Israel echoes nearly 20 months of war, tragedy, and brutality inflicted on the people of Ukraine, people that were very badly hurt since Putin launched his all-out invasion. We've not forgotten the mass graves, the bodies found bearing signs of torture, rape used as a weapon by the Russians, and thousands of Ukrainian children forcibly taken into Russia, stolen from their parents. It's sick. Hamas and Putin represent different threats, but they share this in common. They both want to completely annihilate a neighboring democracy, completely annihilate it. Hamas' stated purpose for existing is the destruction of the state of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses Palestinian civilians as human shields, and innocent Palestinian families are suffering greatly because of them. Meanwhile, Putin denies Ukraine has or ever had real statehood. He claims the Soviet Union created Ukraine. And just 2 weeks ago, he told the world that if the United States and our allies withdraw, and if the United States withdraw, our allies will as well, military support for Ukraine would have, quote, a week left to live, but we're not withdrawing. I know these conflicts can seem far away, and it's natural to ask, why does this matter to America? So let me share with you why making sure Israel and Ukraine succeed is vital for America's national security. History has taught us that when terrorists don't pay a price for their terror, when dictators don't pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos and death and more destruction. They keep going, and the cost and the threats to America and the world keep rising. So if we don't stop Putin's appetite for power and control in Ukraine, he won't limit himself just to Ukraine. Putin's already threatened to remind Poland that their Western land was a gift from Russia. One of his top advisors, a former president of Russia, has called Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania Russia's Baltic provinces. These are all NATO allies. For 75 years, NATO has kept peace in Europe and has been the cornerstone of American security. And if Putin attacks a NATO ally, we will defend every inch of NATO which the treaty requires and calls for. We'll have something that we do not seek make it clear we do not seek to have American troops fighting in Russia or fighting against Russia. Beyond Europe, we know that our allies, and maybe most importantly our adversaries and competitors, are watching. They're watching our response in Ukraine as well. And if we walk away and let Putin erase Ukraine's independence, would-be aggressors around the world would be emboldened to try the same. The risk of conflict and chaos could spread in other parts of the world, in the Indo-Pacific, in the Middle East, especially in the Middle East. Iran is supporting Russia in Ukraine, and is supporting Hamas and other terrorist groups in the region, and will continue to hold them accountable, I might add. The United States and our partners across the region are working to build a better future for the Middle East. One where the Middle East is more stable, better connected to its neighbors, and through innovative projects like the India-Middle East-Europe Rail Corridor that I announced this year at the summit of the world's biggest economies. More predictable markets, more employment, less rage, less grievances, less war when connected. It benefits the people, it would benefit the people of the Middle East, and would benefit us. American leadership is what holds the world together. American alliances are what keep us, America, safe. American values are what make us a partner that other nations want to work with. To put all that at risk, if we walk away from Ukraine, if we turn our backs on Israel, it's just not worth it. That's why tomorrow I'm going to send to Congress an urgent budget request to fund America's national security needs, to support our critical partners, including Israel and Ukraine. It's a smart investment that's going to pay dividends for American security for generations. Help us keep American troops out of harm's way. Help us build a world that is safer, more peaceful, more prosperous for our children and grandchildren. In Israel, we must make sure that they have what they need to protect their people today and always. The security package I'm sending to Congress and asking Congress to do is an unprecedented commitment to Israel's security that will sharpen Israel's qualitative military edge, which we've committed to, the qualitative military edge. We're going to make sure Iron Dome continues to guard the skies over Israel. We're going to make sure other hostile actors in the region know that Israel is stronger than ever and prevent this conflict from spreading. Look, at the same time, President Netanyahu and I discussed again yesterday the critical need for Israel to operate by the laws of war. That means protecting civilians in combat as best as they can. The people of Gaza urgently need food, water, and medicine. Yesterday, in discussions with the leaders of Israel and Egypt, I secured an agreement for the first shipment of humanitarian assistance from the United Nations to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. If Hamas does not divert or steal these shipments, we're going to provide an opening for sustained delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance for the Palestinians. As I said in Israel, as hard as it is, we cannot give up on peace. We cannot give up on a two-state solution. Israel and Palestinians equally deserve to live in safety, dignity, and peace. You know, and here at home, we have to be honest with ourselves. In recent years, too much hate has given too much oxygen, fueling racism, the rise of antisemitism, Islamic phobia, right here in America. It's also intensified in the wake of recent events that led to the horrific threats and attacks that both shock us and break our hearts. On October 7th, terror attacks have triggered deep scars and terrible memories in the Jewish community. Today, Jewish families worried about being targeted in school, wearing symbols of their face walking down the street, or going out about their daily lives. And I know many of you in the Muslim American community, the Arab American community, the Palestinian American community, and so many others are outraged and heartened, saying to yourselves, here we go again with Islamophobia and distrust we saw after 9/11. Just last week, a mother was brutally stabbed. A little boy, here in the United States, a little boy who just turned 6 years old was murdered in their home outside of Chicago. His name was Wadiha, a proud American, a proud Palestinian American family. We can't stand by and stand silent when this happens. We must, without equivocation, denounce antisemitism. We must also, without equivocation, denounce Islamophobia. And to all you hurting, those of you hurting, I want you to know I see you. You belong. And I want to say this to you. You're all America. You're all America. This is in a moment, in moments like these, when fear and suspicion, anger and rage run hard, that we have to work harder than ever to hold on to the values that make us who we are. We're a nation of religious freedom, freedom of expression. We all have a right to debate and disagree without fear of being targeted in schools or workplaces or in our communities. We must renounce violence and vitriol. See each other not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. When I was in Israel yesterday, I said that when America experienced the hell of 9/11, we felt enraged as well. While we sought and got justice, we made mistakes. So I cautioned the government of Israel not to be blinded by rage. And here in America, let us not forget who we are. We reject all forms of hate, whether against Muslim, Jews, or anyone. That's what great nations do, and we are a great nation. On Ukraine, I'm asking Congress to make sure we can continue to send Ukraine the weapons they need to defend themselves and their country without interruption, so Ukraine can stop Putin's brutality in Ukraine. They are succeeding. When Putin invaded Ukraine, he thought he would take Kyiv and all of Ukraine in a matter of days. Well, over a year later, Putin has failed, and he continues to fail. Kyiv still stands because of the bravery of the Ukrainian people. Ukraine has regained more than 50% of the territory Russian troops once occupied, backed by U.S.-led coalition of more than 50 countries around the world, all doing its part to support Kyiv. What would happen if we walked away? We are the essential nation. Meanwhile, Putin has turned to Iran and North Korea to buy attack drones and ammunition to terrorize Ukrainian cities and people. From the outset, I've said, I will not send American troops to fight in Ukraine. All Ukraine is asking for is help for the weapons, munitions, the capacity, the capability to push invading Russian forces off their land, and the air defense systems to shoot down Russian missiles before they destroy Ukrainian cities. Let me be clear about something. We send Ukrainian equipment sitting in our stockpiles. And when we use the money allocated by Congress, we use it to replenish our own stores, our own stockpiles, with new equipment. Equipment that defends America and is made in America. Patriot missiles for air defense batteries, made in Arizona. Artillery shells manufactured in 12 states across the country, in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, and so much more. You know, just as in World War II, today patriotic American workers are building the arsenal of democracy and serving the cause of freedom. Let me close with this. Earlier this year, I boarded Air Force One for a secret flight to Poland. There I boarded a train with blacked out windows for a 10-hour ride each way to Kyiv, to stand with the people of Ukraine ahead of the one-year anniversary of their brave fight against Putin. I'm told I was the first American to enter a war zone not controlled by the United States military since President Lincoln. With me was just a small group of security personnel and a few advisors. But when I exited that train and met President Zelensky, I didn't feel alone. I was bringing with me the idea of America, the promise of America, to the people who are today fighting for the same things we fought for 250 years ago: freedom, independence, self-determination. And as I walked through Kyiv with President Zelensky, with air raid sirens sounding in the distance, I felt something I've always believed, more strongly than ever before. America is a beacon to the world. Still. Whereas my friend Madeleine Albright said, the indispensable nation. Tonight there are innocent people all over the world who hope because of us, who believe in a better life because of us, who are desperate not to be forgotten by us, and who are waiting for us. But time is of the essence. I know we have our divisions at home. We have to get past them. We can't let petty, partisan, angry politics get get in the way of our responsibility as a great nation. We cannot and will not let terrorists like Hamas and tyrants like Putin win. I refuse to let that happen. In moments like these, we have to remember who we are. We are the United States of America. The United States of America. And there is nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. My fellow Americans, thank you for your time. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
Sir, Pope Francis spoke with you yesterday. You spoke with Pope Francis by phone yesterday.
I did.
How did that conversation impact you? What did you take away from that, a conversation with Pope Francis?
Well, there's just one question. The Pope and I are on the same page. He was very, very interested in what we were doing to deal with some of the crises that we're facing, particularly in Israel this time around. And I laid out to him what the game plan was, how we thought we should be providing the kind of assistance to Israel that needed. And the Pope was across the board supportive of what we were doing. Thank you.
Should Israel is the U.S. supporting the hostages for a ceasefire deal?
Why did you? We should have a ceasefire. It's not a ceasefire. We should have those hostages released, and then we can talk.
Has there been any progress on that front, Mr. President?
Two. Ready. Face. Ready. And salute. And salute. Ready. Two. Ready. Doors. Ready. Pop. Open. Ready. Doors. Ready. Shut. Ready. Face. Ready. Step.
You stand the other side. We'll take some pictures here.
Mr. President, are you urging Israel to delay its ground invasion, sir?
Israelis are making their own decisions.
Ready. Two. Ready. Face. Ready. Step. Ready.
Hello, folks. Mr. Prime Minister, we've been in close touch since the moment you came into office. Please sit down, I'm sorry. Since you came into office, and we've met all around the world. And now it's wonderful to have you by my side here at the White House. And as we advance our alliance even more than has already been advanced. It's strong now, it's getting stronger. Before I get to the progress Australia and the United States have made today, I want to say just a very few words about the situation in the Middle East. The anger, the hurt, the sense of outrage that the Israeli people are feeling after the brutally inflicted devastation by Hamas is completely understandable. Israel has the right, and I would add a responsibility, to respond to the slaughter of their people. And we will ensure Israel has what it needs to defend itself against these terrorists. That's a guarantee. We also have to remember that Hamas does not represent, let me say it again, Hamas does not represent the vast majority of the Palestinian people on the Gaza Strip or anywhere else. Hamas is hiding behind Palestinian civilians and is despicable and, not surprisingly, cowardly as well. This also puts an added burden on Israel while they go after Hamas. But that does not lessen the need to operate in a line with the laws of war. For Israel has to do everything in its power. Israel has to do everything in its power. As difficult it is to protect innocent civilians, that's difficult. I want to thank the Israelis and the Palestinian, and President Sisi of Egypt for working with the United States to make sure that food, water, and medical supplies are getting through to innocent people in Gaza. The flow needs to increase, and we're working very hard with our partners to make that happen. We're also working around the clock together with our partners in the region to secure the release of hostages, and including American citizens left behind and held by Hamas, and the safe passage of foreign nationals out of Gaza, not just Americans, but Australians and a whole range of people who are trapped in Gaza. I also want to take a moment to look ahead toward the future that we seek. Israelis and Palestinians equally deserve to live side by side in safety, dignity, and peace. There's no going back to the status quo as it stood on October the 6th. That means ensuring Hamas can no longer terrorize Israel and use Palestinian civilians as human shields. It also means that when this crisis is over, there has to be a vision of what comes next, and in our view, it has to be a two-state solution. It means a concentrated effort from all the parties, Israelis, Palestinians, regional partners, global leaders, to put us on a path toward peace. In the past few weeks, I've spoken to leaders throughout the region, including King Abdullah of Jordan, President Sisi of Egypt, President Abbas of the Palestinian Authority, and just yesterday with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, about making sure there's real hope in the region for a better future. About the need, and I mean this sincerely, about the need to work toward a greater integration for Israel, while insisting that the aspirations of the Palestinian people will be part of that future as well. I'm convinced one of the reasons Hamas attacked when they did, and I have no proof of this, just my instinct tells me, is because of the progress we were making towards regional integration for Israel and regional integration overall. And we can't leave that work behind. And one more word on this. I continue to be alarmed about extremist settlers attacking Palestinians in the West Bank, that pouring gasoline on fire is what it's like. This was a deal. The deal was made, and they're attacking Palestinians in places that they're entitled to be. And it has to stop. They have to be held accountable, and it has to stop now. What do you got? Washington Post. I think that's right.
Mr.
Oh, there you are. Sorry, I couldn't see in the light.
Mr. President, Israel's war in Gaza, more than 11,000 Palestinians just for a month, and
I'm
created.
sorry, you're breaking up. I didn't.
Israel's war in Gaza has killed more than 11,000 Palestinians just over a month and created a humanitarian disaster. Israeli officials have said this war could take months or even years. Have you communicated to Prime Minister Netanyahu any sort of deadline or time frame for how long you are willing to support Israel in this operation? Are you comfortable with the operation going on indefinitely, and is there any deal underway to free hostages? Thank you.
Yes, no, working backwards, forward. Look, I have been deeply involved in moving on the hostage negotiation. I don't want to get ahead of myself here because I don't know what's happened in the last 4 hours, but we've gotten great cooperation from the Qataris. I've spoken with them as well a number of times. I think the pause and that the Israelis have agreed to, it's down to, I'm getting too much detail. I know, Mr. Secretary, I'm going to stop. But I am mildly hopeful. I'm mildly hopeful. With regard to when is this going to stop, I think it's going to stop when Hamas no longer maintains the capacity to murder and abuse and just do horrific things to the Israelis. And they still think that, at least as of this morning, they still thought they could. I guess the best way for me to say it is that I take a look. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, acknowledges they have an obligation to use as much caution as they can in going after their targets. It's not like they're rushing in the hospital, knocking down doors and, pulling people aside and shooting people indiscriminately. But Hamas, as I said they plan on attacking Israelis again. And this is a terrible dilemma. So what do you do? I think that Israel is also taking risks themselves about their folks being killed and one-to-one going through these hospital rooms, hospital halls. But one thing has been established is that Hamas does have headquarters, weapons, materiel below this hospital, and I suspect others. But how long it's going to last, I don't know. Look, I made it clear to the Israelis that to Bibi and to his war cabinet that I think the only ultimate answer here is a two-state solution. It's real. We got to get to the point where there is an ability to be able to even talk without worrying about whether or not we're just dealing with, they're dealing with Hamas that's going to engage in the same activities they did over the past, on the 7th. So it's, but I can't tell, I'm not a fortune teller, I can't tell you how long it's going to last. But I can tell you I don't think it ultimately ends until there's a two-state solution. I made it clear to the Israelis I think it's a big mistake for them to think they're going to occupy Gaza and maintain Gaza. I don't think that works. And so I think you're going to see efforts to bring along, well, I shouldn't go into anymore because that's been things I've been negotiating with Arab countries and others about what the next steps are. But anyway, thank you all very much. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. This ends the press conference.
When Hamas said they plan on doing the same thing again with what they did on the 7th. They're going to go in, they want to slaughter Israelis. They want to do it again. They've said it out loud. They're not kidding about it. They're not backing off. And so I just asked a rhetorical question. I wonder what we would do if that were the case.
On the hostages, though, you said we're coming for you. What do you mean to the American hostages when you said,
Oh.
we're coming for you?
What I meant was I'm doing everything in my power to get you out. Coming to help you, to get you out. I don't mean sending military in to get them. Is that what you thought I might mean? No. I was not talking about the military. I was talking about you're on our mind every single day, 5-6 times a day. I'm working on how I can be helpful in getting the hostages released and have a period of time where there's a pause long enough to let that happen. And there's somewhere between 50 and 100 hostages there, we think.
And sir, one's a 3-year-old American child.
You're darn right it is. That's why I'm not going to stop till we get her.
Question about the idea of raid on the Al-Shifa hospital, as it tries to contain and take out the Hamas that is there. This week you also said that we must protect hospitals. So when you weigh the target against the number of civilians inside the hospital, is the operation underway justified?
Well, look, we did discuss this, by the way, but we can't let it get out of control. Here's the situation. You have a circumstance where the first war crime is being committed by Hamas by having their headquarters, their military, hidden under a hospital. And that's a fact. That's what's happened. Israel did not go in with large number of troops, did not raid, did not rush everything down. They've gone in, and they've gone in with their soldiers carrying weapons, their guns. They were told, let me be precise. We've discussed the need for them to be incredibly careful. You have a circumstance where you know there is a fair number of Hamas terrorists. Hamas has already said publicly that they plan on attacking Israel again, like they did before, do everything cutting babies' heads off to burning women and children alive. And so the idea that they're going to just stop and not do anything is not realistic. This is not the carpet bombing. This is a different thing. They're going through these tunnels. They're going in the hospital. And if you notice, I was mildly preoccupied today. I apologize. I didn't see everything. But what I did see, whether I haven't had it confirmed yet, I am asked my team to answer the question. But what happened is they're also bringing in incubators. We're bringing in other means to help the people in the hospital. And they've given the doctors and, I'm told, the doctors and nurses and personnel an opportunity to get out of harm's way. So this is a different story than I believe what was occurring before with indiscriminate bombing. Well, first, good morning. I want to say a few words about the ongoing effort to bring home the hostages. And Hamas has been holding since October the 7th. We've been working on this intensively for weeks, as you all know. I've spoken recently about it with both the Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Emir Qatar. And my team has been in the region shuttling between capitals. We're now very close, very close. We could bring some of these hostages home very soon. But I don't want to get into the details of things because nothing is done until it's done. And we have more to say, we will, but things are looking good at the moment. Take a few questions.
Mr. President, when will the first American hostages be released since none were included today?
We don't know when that will occur, but we expect it to occur. And we don't know what the list of all the hostages are and when they'll be released, but we know the numbers that are going to be released. So it's my hope and expectation will be soon.
And of the 10 Americans that are unaccounted for, do you know all of their conditions? Are they all alive?
We don't know all their conditions.
Mr. President, how long do you expect this war is going to take? And have you encouraged Prime Minister Netanyahu to set a timeline, say, by the end of this year?
I've encouraged the Prime Minister to focus on trying to reduce the number of casualties while he is attempting to eliminate Hamas, which is a legitimate objective he has. That's a difficult task, and I don't know how long it will take. My expectation and hope is that as we move forward, the rest of the Arab world and the region is also putting pressure on all sides to slow this down, to bring this to an end as quickly as we can.
Mr. President,
what
do
are
you
the chances of this truce could be extended by a few days or more?
I think the chances are real.
Mr. President, there are members of your party who would like to see conditions placed on aid to Israel. What is your view on that? They would like to see, a reduction of the bombing and that sort of thing.
Well, I think that's a worthwhile thought, but I don't think if I started off with that, we'd ever gotten to where we are today. We have to take this a piece at a time.
Mr. President, do you trust Hamas to uphold their end of the deal?
I don't trust Hamas to do anything right. I only trust Hamas to respond to pressure.
Mr. President, you said you were hoping to get cooperation from Arab leaders. What are you hearing from them when you talk to them? What would you like to see them do?
I'm hearing a lot, but I'm not going to speak to it right now. There's an overwhelming desire on the part of the region to, let me back up. I cannot prove what I'm about to say, but I believe one of the reasons why Hamas struck when they did was they knew that I was working very closely with the Saudis and others in the region to bring peace to the region by having recognition of Israel and Israel's right to exist. You may recall when we did the G20 about a little while ago, I was able to get a resolution, a statement passed through there saying we're going to build a railroad from Riyadh all the way through the Middle East into Saudi Arabia, Israel, et cetera, and all the way up to Europe. Not the railroad, but it would be an underground pipeline and then railroad. The whole idea is there's overwhelming interest, and I think most Arab nations know it, in coordinating with one another to change the dynamic in their region for longer-term peace. And that is what I'm going to continue to work on. Thank you all very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you all. I hope you enjoyed it.
Mr. President, how is Abigail doing? What's her physical condition? Do you have any information on that?
I haven't gotten that information. I just wanted to let you know immediately. They were going across into Egypt, as you recall. That was the route. But an older, non-American, elderly woman is very sick and was in need of immediate medical help. So they arranged to cross directly into Israel to be able to take her to a hospital. All I know is that she has been held. I don't know. I haven't seen a photograph. I've just been in communication with my team. But she is safely ensconced in Israel. But there's a lot more work to be done.
How many days would you like to see the pause go on for?
I would like to see us move to a point where we were able to, well, let me put it this way. I'd like to see the pause go on as long as prisoners kept coming out. All right, thank you all so very much. I know, we have to call you. I know you say, what's he calling me with only 10 minutes or so notice? I said, that's the notice I get, because we didn't know, I didn't want to be having this press conference if they weren't physically, even when they were in the Red Cross ambulance, I didn't want to do it because they were not out. They were still in Gaza. So I don't thank you enough, but thanks for your patience. And I know it's...
We're here anytime, sir.
President of the United States.
Well, Rabbi, thank you, and thank you for your blessings. Thank you, Doug, and the staff for lighting this special White House menorah. As Doug said, that was from a piece of material from one of the beams in the White House. And I thought it's about time we had a permanent menorah here in the White House. And to all of you, this means so much to Jill and me and to Doug and Kamala that you're here. I also want to thank, special thanks to my buddy, standing right here in the front, Chuck Schumer. Chuck's our leader in the Senate. He's a great leader. He recently delivered a powerful and historic speech, and I mean a powerful and historic, combating antisemitism. I encourage everyone to read it. Everyone in America should read it. Chuck, thank you, pal. You always stand up. The Talmud says what comes from the heart goes to the heart. That's the warmth and kinship I feel so deeply with the Jewish community. I got in trouble, got criticized very badly by the southern part of my state and some of the southern parts of the country when 35 years ago I said, you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist, and I'm a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. Hanukkah is a timeless story of miracles. Think about it. From the Maccabees defeating one of the history's most powerful empires on an oil lasting 8 days was a miracle all by itself. The flame of faith that endures from tragedy to persecution to survival and to hope. That's what it survives to, survival and hope. But we know this year's Hanukkah is different. It's been 65 years since the deadliest day of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. 65 years. Most of you, and I got to meet with 5 survivors downstairs. That's why we're a little bit late. 5 survivors in each of the camps. I've taken all my children when they turned 14 years of age, my 3 children who lived and my 5 grandchildren. When they're 14 years old, I put them on a plane, I take them to Dachau because I want them to see. I want them to spend the day there and see. You can't pretend you don't know. Silence is complicity. Most of you know someone directly or indirectly, a family, a friend, is stolen from you, or wounded, traumatized, or called up in the reserves in this last attack in Israel. As I said after the attack, my commitment to the safety of the Jewish people and security of Israel and its right to exist is independent, as an independent Jewish state is unshakable. Folks, were there no Israel, there wouldn't be a Jew in the world who was safe. Were there no Israel. I make no bones about it. I've had my differences with some Israeli leadership. I've known Bibi for now 51 years. He has a picture on his desk of he and I when he was a young member of the Israeli service here, foreign service. And I was a 32-year-old senator. And I wrote on the top of it, Bibi, I love you, but I don't agree with a damn thing you had to say. It's about the same today. I love it. But look, it's a tough spot. Tough spot. We continue to provide military assistance to Israel until they get rid of Hamas. But we have to be careful. They have to be careful. The whole world's public opinion can shift overnight. We can't let that happen. We're working relentlessly for the safe return of the hostages. I personally spent countless hours, and I mean it, probably up to 20 hours, with the Qataris and the Egyptians, the Israelis, to secure the freedom of hostages, to get the trucks in, to get the humanitarian aid flowing, to convince them to open the gate, to have El-Sisi make sure he opened the gate into Egypt. And there's a whole range of things going on now that are really very, very difficult. We've gotten more than 100 hostages out, and we're not going to stop till we get every one of them home. And we'll continue to lead the world in humanitarian assistance to innocent Palestinian civilians. We'll emphasize to our friends, to our Israeli friends, we need to protect civilian life. Then let me be clear. Hamas using rape, sexual violence, and terrorism and torture of Israeli women and girls is appalling and unforgivable. And you should, when I was there, saw some of the photographs. It's beyond comprehension. We all have to condemn such brutality without equivocation, without exception. I also recognize your hurt from the silence and the fear and for your safety, because the surge of anti-Semitism in the United States of America and around the world is sickening. You know, we see it across our communities in schools and colleges and social media. They surface painful scars from millennia of hate to genocide of the Jewish people. My dad was a righteous Christian, for real. My dad would come home from work. He was a well-read man, never had a chance to go to college. And he'd come home before he closed down the business he didn't own, but he managed to go back and close it. And the kitchen table was, the dinner table was where we had conversation and incidentally ate. My dad taught us about the horror of the Shoah. He talked about why we didn't let the ship in, why we didn't bomb the railroad tracks, and on and on and on. As I said, it awakened in me and my brothers and sisters and our children a sense, and our grandchildren, that this can happen again. Silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. As I said, that's why I've taken all of my children and grandchildren to Dachau and one to Auschwitz. Look, folks, we just met with Holocaust survivors downstairs, including a widow of a dear friend of the late Elie Wiesel, who taught us about the perils of indifference. I think that they experienced only to see what's happening today. It's been clear that our administration stands with them, arm in arm in arm. We're not going to walk away. We're aggressive. We're addressing and implementing the first ever national strategy to combat anti-Semitism, prosecuting hate crimes, addressing anti-Semitism in schools, increasing security around Jewish centers of life, and more. We're calling upon all Americans to make clear there is no place for hate in America against Jews, Muslims, or anybody else. That's why I got Deborah Lipchitz, the Holocaust expert and the first American ambassador-level special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism around the world. It matters. You know, in this moment, we must hold to the core values that make us Americans: equality, justice, freedom, dignity, respect. Values that, from the inception of our nation, have shaped the culture, the contributions, and the values of Jewish Americans, including all of you, including nearly 300,000 Jews who peacefully rallied on the National Mall last month with enormous pride, unity, pride, unity, even joy in the face of extraordinary pain. You embody what the late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks said. A people whose capacity for joy cannot be destroyed itself. It cannot destroy itself. It's indestructible. Let me close with this. You know, after October 7th, a father returned to his kibbutz to salvage what he could from his home. What was left was the rubble and ruin. The home, which he had hidden in with his wife and his daughter for 20 hours before being rescued, a home in the same neighborhood where his beloved son was brutally murdered. Unlike the ancient Hanukkah story, buried piles of shattered glass, burned debris, and bullet-riddled walls, he pulled something from the ashes fully intact, a menorah. That's now on display in the foyer of this White House, your house, just outside this room. He gave it to the President of Israel, who lent it to the Ambassador Jack Lew, a symbol of the Jewish people that not only survive, but heal, rebuild, and continue to shining their light in the world. A reminder to hold on to the miracle of hope and faith. Because when we do, no night is so dark we can't find light. No night is so dark we can't find light. No one knows that better than the Jewish people. So ladies and gentlemen, happy Hanukkah and God bless you all.
Sorry, so the question was just if you could talk a little bit about the Gaza operation, Israel flooding Hamas tunnels, and if you've had conversations with Bibi Netanyahu about how long that operation should last.
Well, I have had conversations with Bibi Netanyahu, and I want to make sure that we don't forget what we're doing here. We have to support Israel because they're an independent nation that's being, I mean, the brutality, the inhumanity, the way in which Hamas treated the Israelis, and I mean, raping and burning and beheading. I mean, it's just beyond comparison, and to anything else that I've seen since I've been here, and I've been around for a long time. But I think that we have made it clear to the Israelis, and they're aware that the safety of innocent Palestinians is still of great concern. And so the actions they're taking must be consistent with attempting to do everything possible to prevent innocent Palestinian civilians from being hurt, murdered, killed, lost, etc. And look, it doesn't lessen the responsibility going after Hamas to innocent Palestinians and Hamas. Look, we have a responsibility to protect citizens and ensure they have access to humanitarian assistance. That's why I've worked so hard with our Arab friends as well as the Israelis to get humanitarian assistance into Israel, literally getting up to 140 trucks loaded with gear, loaded with food, loaded with everything that is needed by the Palestinians, including fuel. So, you know, Israel has stated its intent to fulfill these responsibilities. It's very difficult. With regard to the flooding of the tunnels, there is assertions being made that there's quite sure there are no hostages in any of these tunnels, but I don't know that for a fact. I do know that, though, every civilian death is an absolute tragedy, and Israel stated its intent, as I said, to match its words with its intent with actions. That's what I was talking about today.